The acacia thorns tore at Dr. Sarah Mitchell's khaki sleeves as she crouched behind the termite mound, her heart breaking at the scene unfolding through her binoculars. What she witnessed that scorching afternoon in the Masai Mara would challenge everything scientists thought they knew about maternal instinct in the wild. A cheetah mother making an impossible choice that would bring seasoned researchers to tears. The morning sun cast long shadows across the golden grasslands of Kenya's most famous wildlife reserve, as Dr. Sarah Mitchell adjusted her wide-brimmed hat and checked her field notes one final time. At 45, the British wildlife behavioral specialist had dedicated over 2 decades to studying the intricate social dynamics of Africa's big cats, but her current research grant from Oxford University represented the culmination of her life's work, a comprehensive 3-year study on cheetah maternal behavior in their natural habitat. Sarah had arrived at the Amara research station 6 months earlier, establishing her base camp near the Talek River, where cheetah sightings were most frequent. Her weathered Land Rover, equipped with radio tracking equipment and high-powered cameras, had become a familiar sight to the local Maasai guides who respected her dedication and quiet approach to wildlife observation. Unlike the safari tourists who sought dramatic encounters, Sarah preferred the patient art of long-term behavioral documentation, sometimes spending entire days motionless in her portable blind, waiting for those rare moments when wild animals revealed their most intimate behaviors. This particular morning held special significance. Her radio collar data indicated that Amara, a 7-year-old female cheetah she had been tracking for months, was likely with her 4-month-old cubs somewhere in the vicinity of Leopard Gorge. Sarah had watched this magnificent mother successfully raise 2 previous litters, documenting her exceptional hunting skills and protective instincts that made her one of the most successful mothers in the reserve. Sarah's radio crackled to life as she navigated the rocky terrain toward Leopard Gorge, the metallic voice of James Kimani, her Maasai research assistant, cutting through the static. "Dr. Mitchell, you need to come quickly to the eastern ridge. Something terrible has happened to Amara's family." The urgency in his voice made Sarah's stomach drop as she accelerated across the uneven ground, dust clouds billowing behind her vehicle. When she reached the coordinates James had provided, the scene that greeted her defied comprehension. Scattered across a small clearing were the remains of what had clearly been a violent encounter. Tufts of golden fur caught on thorny bushes, deep claw marks gouged into the red earth, and the unmistakable tracks of a large male leopard weaving between the chaos. James stood silently beside a cluster of rocks, his weathered face etched with an expression Sarah had never seen in their months of working together. Following his gaze, Sarah discovered the heartbreaking evidence of nature's cruelest reality. 3 small bodies lay motionless among the scattered stones, Amara's cubs who just days earlier had been playfully tumbling over each other while their mother hunted nearby. The leopard had found them during the night while Amara was away securing food, and the young cheetahs, barely 4 months old, had been defenseless against the much larger predator who viewed them as competition for territory and prey. But James wasn't looking at the tragic scene of the lost cubs. His eyes were fixed on a lone acacia tree about 100 meters away, where a movement had caught his attention. Through her binoculars, Sarah could make out Amara's distinctive spotted coat pressed against the trunk, and clinging desperately to her back was a single surviving cub, the smallest of the litter, who had somehow escaped the massacre that claimed his siblings. Through her telephoto lens, Sarah watched in amazement as Amara displayed behavior she had never documented in 15 years of cheetah research. The grieving mother wasn't simply carrying her surviving cub to safety, she was actively shielding him with her own body while continuously scanning the horizon for threats. Every few minutes she would lower her head to nuzzle the trembling youngster, her rough tongue grooming his fur in gentle, deliberate strokes that seemed designed more for comfort than cleanliness. The surviving cub, whom Sarah had previously noted in her research logs as the runt of the litter, clung to his mother with an intensity that transcended normal feline behavior. His tiny claws were embedded so deeply in Amara's fur that they appeared permanently attached, and his golden eyes darted frantically at every sound. The rustle of grass, the call of a distant bird, even the whisper of wind through the acacia leaves. Unlike his more adventurous siblings who had often wandered from their mother's side to explore their surroundings, this little one seemed to understand instinctively that separation meant death. What struck Sarah most profoundly was Amara's vocalization pattern. Cheetahs typically communicate through chirps and purrs, but the sounds emanating from this mother were unlike anything in the scientific literature. Deep, guttural calls that seemed to blend grief with determination, interspersed with soft mewing sounds directed specifically at her remaining cub. James translated quietly. She's telling him they're alone now, but she won't let anything happen to him. As the hours passed, Sarah documented something that challenged conventional wisdom about cheetah survival strategies. Instead of seeking the safety of tall grass or rocky outcroppings where they could hide, Amara deliberately chose exposed positions where she could see approaching danger from all directions. She was sacrificing the tactical advantage of concealment for the strategic benefit of early warning, essentially using herself as both shield and sentinel for her precious cargo. Sarah's satellite phone buzzed with an incoming call from Dr. Marcus Oching, the chief wildlife veterinarian at the Kenya Wildlife Service headquarters in Nairobi. Word of Amara's situation had spread quickly through the research community's communication network, and Marcus was coordinating an emergency response team. "Sarah, we're mobilizing everything we have." His voice carried the weight of 2 decades managing wildlife crises. "This isn't just about one cheetah and her cub. If we can document successful intervention strategies, it could revolutionize how we approach similar situations across East Africa." Within 3 hours, a convoy of vehicles arrived at Sarah's coordinates, kicking up clouds of red dust that could be seen for miles across the savannah. Leading the team was Dr. Elena Vasquez, a Spanish wildlife psychologist specializing in trauma response in big cats, whose groundbreaking work with orphaned leopards in Botswana had earned international recognition. Alongside her came David Rotich, a Kenyan conservation officer with 30 years of field experience and an uncanny ability to predict animal behavior in crisis situations. The rescue team also included Dr. Jennifer Walsh, an American veterinarian whose mobile medical unit was equipped with the most advanced tranquilizer technology available for field operations. Her modified land cruiser contained everything from ultrasound equipment to surgical supplies, essentially functioning as a wilderness hospital on wheels. James had established communication with local Maasai elders, who provided crucial intelligence about recent predator movements in the area, including reports of the same male leopard that had attacked Amara's cubs being spotted near other cheetah territories. As the team assembled their equipment and established a safe perimeter, Elena raised a critical concern that none of them had initially considered. The psychological trauma bond between this mother and cub is likely stronger than anything we've encountered before, she explained while studying Amara through high-powered binoculars. Any intervention that separates them, even temporarily, could cause irreversible psychological damage to both animals. We're not just dealing with physical survival here. We're looking at the complete breakdown of normal cheetah behavioral patterns. The next 72 hours became a delicate dance between human intervention and wild instinct as Amara faced challenge after challenge in her desperate quest to keep her remaining cub alive. Sarah's continuous monitoring revealed that the traumatized mother had completely abandoned her normal hunting routine, refusing to leave her cub's side even when prime prey wandered within striking distance. Gazelles grazed peacefully just 50 meters away while Amara remained motionless, her maternal priorities overriding millions of years of predatory evolution. Dr. Vasquez documented alarming changes in both animals' behavior patterns. The cub, now showing signs of severe dehydration, had stopped responding to his mother's attempts to encourage movement. His once bright eyes appeared glazed and unfocused, and his desperate clinging had evolved into a listless grip that concerned the veterinary team. Meanwhile, Amara's condition deteriorated rapidly as she entered her 4th day without food, her ribs becoming increasingly visible beneath her spotted coat. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The situation escalated dramatically when David Rotich's radio crackled with reports from Maasai herders about unusual predator activity in the region. The male leopard responsible for the initial attack had been joined by a second adult male, and both were systematically hunting in expanding circles that would inevitably bring them back to Amara's location. "They can smell the weakness," David explained grimly. "In the wild, vulnerability attracts predators like blood and water." Dr. Walsh attempted several innovative approaches to provide nutrition without direct human contact. Her team strategically placed fresh water sources and small prey carcasses at increasing distances from Amara's position, hoping to encourage gradual movement toward resources. However, each attempt failed as the mother cheetah refused to investigate anything that required leaving her elevated vantage point. Elena observed through her behavioral analysis equipment that Amara had entered what she termed fortress mode, a psychological state where protection superseded all other survival instincts, even at the cost of her own life. The breaking point arrived on the 5th morning when Sarah's radio scanner picked up distress signals that made her blood run cold. The 2 male leopards had been spotted less than 2 kilometers away, moving systematically toward Amara's position, with the calculated patience of apex predators who sensed easy prey. Dr. Ocheng's voice crackled through the emergency frequency. "Sarah, we have maybe 6 hours before those leopards reach the acacia grove. If we don't act now, we're going to lose both animals." The rescue team faced an impossible dilemma that would haunt wildlife conservation protocols for years to come. Elena's psychological assessment concluded that any attempt to tranquilize and relocate Amara and her cub would likely result in the mother's complete mental breakdown, potentially causing her to abandon or even harm her offspring in confusion and panic. However, Dr. Walsh's medical evaluation painted an equally grim picture. Both animals were now critically dehydrated and malnourished, with the cub showing early signs of organ failure that could become irreversible within hours. David Rodich proposed the most controversial solution, using controlled fire barriers to redirect the approaching leopards, while simultaneously creating a corridor that might encourage Amara to move toward a prepared sanctuary area. This strategy had never been attempted with cheetahs and carried enormous risks, including the possibility of triggering a stampede among other wildlife or accidentally trapping the very animals they were trying to save. The decision required approval from the highest levels of the Kenya Wildlife Service, and time was running out with each passing minute. As the team debated their options, Sarah made a heart-wrenching observation through her telephoto lens. Amara had begun what appeared to be a farewell ritual with her cub, grooming him with an intensity and thoroughness that suggested she understood their situation was hopeless. The mother cheetah's actions became increasingly desperate. She would lift the weakening cub and attempt to carry him short distances, only to return to their exposed position when his weight became too much for her own compromised strength. The moment of ultimate decision arrived when Elena's radio burst with urgent reports. "The leopards have changed direction. They're moving faster now, following scent trails. We have less than 2 hours." Dr. Walsh prepared her tranquilizer equipment with trembling hands, knowing that whatever choice they made would determine whether this story ended in triumph or tragedy. The weight of 2 lives hung in the balance as Sarah whispered into her radio, "We can't wait any longer. Whatever we're going to do, it has to be now." The rescue operation unfolded with military precision as Dr. Walsh's tranquilizer darts found their marks simultaneously, dropping both Amara and her cub into peaceful unconsciousness, just as smoke from David's controlled burns began drifting across the savannah. Within minutes, the unconscious pair was loaded into the mobile medical unit, where Elena immediately began psychological conditioning protocols designed to minimize trauma during their upcoming relocation. The team had identified a protected sanctuary 50 kilometers north, an enclosed reserve where Amara could recover without the constant threat of territorial predators. During the 3-hour journey to Mara Springs Wildlife Sanctuary, Dr. Walsh worked frantically to stabilize both patients. The cub, now named Jengo by the Maasai team members, required immediate intravenous hydration and showed signs of severe malnutrition that had stunted his growth significantly below normal parameters for his age. Amara's condition proved even more complex. Her body had begun consuming its own muscle tissue to survive, and her stress hormone levels indicated psychological trauma that could affect her ability to hunt and care for her offspring permanently. The sanctuary's specialized Cheetah rehabilitation facility had been hastily modified to accommodate their unique psychological bond. Instead of standard separation protocols, Elena designed connected enclosures with removable barriers that would allow gradual independence training while maintaining visual and scent contact between mother and cub. Sarah documented their awakening with meticulous detail as Amara's first instinct upon regaining consciousness was to locate Jengo, her distressed chirping calls echoing through the facility until she confirmed his presence in the adjacent enclosure. Over the following weeks, both cheetahs began their slow journey toward physical recovery, though their emotional healing proved far more complicated. Jengo, having missed crucial developmental milestones during the crisis, struggled with basic motor skills and showed little interest in play behavior typical of cubs his age. His world had contracted to include only his mother, and he displayed severe anxiety whenever she moved beyond his direct sightline. Amara, meanwhile, had developed hypervigilant behaviors that interfered with normal activities like eating and sleeping, constantly scanning for threats that no longer existed in their protected environment. The breakthrough came during the third week when sanctuary staff introduced controlled hunting simulations using mechanical prey devices. For the first time since the tragedy, Amara's predatory instincts slowly began to resurface, though she insisted on keeping Jengo close during every exercise, teaching him skills he should have learned months earlier in the wild. 2 years after that devastating morning in Leopard Gorge, Sarah stood at the observation deck of Mara Springs Wildlife Sanctuary, watching a scene that brought tears to her eyes for entirely different reasons. Jengo, now a magnificent young male cheetah with distinctive rosette patterns inherited from his mother, was successfully stalking practice prey, while Amara observed from her favorite resting spot beneath a fever tree. The bond between them had evolved into something unprecedented in cheetah research, a collaborative hunting partnership that defied everything scientists understood about typical mother-cub separation patterns. Elena's revolutionary rehabilitation program had transformed not just 2 individual animals, but the entire approach to wildlife trauma recovery across East Africa. The Amara protocol, as it became known in conservation circles, emphasized maintaining family bonds during treatment rather than forcing premature independence. Sanctuaries from Tanzania to Botswana began implementing similar programs, with remarkable success rates that challenged decades of established wildlife management practices. Dr. Walsh's medical innovations during the crisis had led to the development of portable intervention equipment now standard in Kenya Wildlife Service emergency response vehicles. The impact extended far beyond scientific circles, as Sarah's documentation of their story sparked global awareness about the complex emotional lives of wildlife. Her photography exhibition, titled Unbreakable Bonds, toured major cities worldwide, raising over $2 million for cheetah conservation programs. The images of Amara shielding Jengo beneath the acacia tree became iconic symbols of maternal devotion, inspiring everything from children's books to documentary films that educated millions about the urgent need to protect Africa's dwindling cheetah populations. Perhaps most remarkably, Jengo had successfully mated the previous season with a female cheetah introduced to the sanctuary's breeding program. 3 healthy cubs now played in the grasslands under their grandmother Amara's watchful eye, representing hope for a species whose numbers had declined by over 70% in recent decades. The genetic diversity they contributed was invaluable, but their behavioral patterns proved even more significant, as researchers observed unprecedented cooperative hunting techniques being passed down through generations. David Rodich often brought visiting conservation students to observe what he called the miracle family, explaining how their story had revolutionized emergency response protocols throughout Kenya's national parks. New early warning systems now prevented similar leopard attacks, while improved veterinary facilities ensured that future wildlife emergencies could be addressed within hours rather than days. The Maasai community had embraced their role as guardians of this remarkable family, with local children learning traditional stories that celebrated the unbreakable bond between Amara and Jengo. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. On quiet evenings when the African sun painted the savanna in shades of gold and crimson, visitors to Mara Springs could still hear Amara's distinctive calls echoing across the grasslands. No longer cries of desperation, but gentle conversations with her son and grandchildren. Her story had become a testament to the power of love transcending survival instinct, proving that sometimes the greatest victories in nature come not from adapting to loss, but from refusing to accept it as final. 5 years had passed since that fateful morning when Sarah first witnessed Amara's desperate vigil, and the ripple effects of their story continued to transform wildlife conservation across the African continent. The Amara Research Institute, established with funds raised from Sarah's documentary work, had become the premier facility for studying trauma recovery in big cats, with researchers from 12 countries conducting groundbreaking studies on animal psychology and resilience. Dr. Vasquez now directed the Institute's Behavioral Research Division, where her team had documented over 40 successful interventions using the protocols developed during Amara's crisis. The success of Jengo's integration had inspired a revolutionary cheetah reintroduction program that challenged traditional assumptions about captive-born animals returning to the wild. Unlike conventional approaches that emphasized complete human avoidance, the new methodology incorporated gradual exposure techniques that prepared animals for eventual release while maintaining crucial family support systems. 3 of Jengo's offspring had been successfully relocated to protected reserves in Tanzania and Botswana, carrying with them the unique behavioral adaptations their family had developed during their extraordinary recovery journey. Sarah's research had evolved into a comprehensive database tracking the long-term psychological impacts of trauma on African wildlife, with Amara and Jengo serving as the foundational case study. Her findings revealed that animals who survived catastrophic events with family support showed significantly higher rates of successful reproduction and territorial establishment compared to solitary survivors. This data influenced policy changes across multiple countries, with wildlife agencies now prioritizing family unit preservation during rescue operations rather than focusing solely on individual animal welfare. The educational impact proved equally transformative as schools throughout Kenya incorporated Amara's story into their environmental curriculum, teaching children about conservation through the lens of maternal dedication and resilience. Local communities that had previously viewed cheetahs as threats to livestock began participating in protection programs, inspired by the universal message of a mother's love transcending species boundaries. The Maasai guides who had assisted during the original rescue became conservation ambassadors, sharing their experiences with thousands of visitors who came to witness the miracle family's ongoing legacy. International recognition arrived when the United Nations Environment Program selected Amara as a symbol for their global wildlife protection campaign, with her image appearing on conservation materials distributed in over 60 countries. The economic benefits to local communities were substantial, as ecotourism focused on their story generated millions of dollars in revenue while creating employment opportunities for former poachers who transitioned to becoming wildlife guardians and guides. Dr. Walsh had established a mobile veterinary network modeled after the equipment and techniques developed during Amara's treatment, with specially trained teams now stationed throughout East Africa's major wildlife corridors. Their rapid response capabilities had already prevented dozens of similar tragedies, with intervention times reduced from days to hours through improved communication systems and strategically positioned medical supplies. On a golden afternoon that mirrored the morning of their first encounter, Sarah sat in her weathered observation chair overlooking the expanded Mara Springs Sanctuary, now home to over 30 cheetahs whose lineages could be traced back to Amara's remarkable survival. At 73 years old, the matriarch moved with the dignified grace of an elder who had defied nature's harshest realities, her spotted coat now silvered with age, but her alert amber eyes still scanning the horizon with the same protective intensity that had saved her son's life a decade earlier. Jengo's descendants played in the tall grass nearby, their playful chirps and tumbling movements, a joyful contrast to the desperate silence that had once marked this family's darkest hours. The third generation of cheetahs born from Amara's bloodline displayed behavioral traits that fascinated researchers worldwide, an unusual tendency toward cooperative hunting and extended family bonds that suggested evolutionary adaptations born from trauma and love. These young cheetahs seemed to understand instinctively that survival meant more than individual strength. It required the unbreakable connections that bound families together through the most impossible circumstances. Sarah's final research paper, published that spring in the Journal of Wildlife Conservation, concluded with words that had become her life's philosophy. In studying Amara and Jengo, we discovered that nature's greatest lessons aren't found in the law of the jungle, but in the moments when love proves stronger than survival instinct. Their story reminds us that sometimes the most profound scientific discoveries come not from laboratories or theories, but from witnessing the extraordinary courage of ordinary creatures who refuse to abandon those they cherish most. As the sun set over the African savanna, casting long shadows across the grasslands where their journey had begun, the gentle sounds of Amara's family settling in for another peaceful night served as a living testament that some bonds truly are unbreakable. Years later, visitors from around the world would make pilgrimages to Mara Springs, drawn by a story that had transcended wildlife documentation to become something much more profound. The simple bronze plaque erected near the sanctuary entrance bore witness to countless tears shed by strangers who found pieces of their own struggles reflected in Amara's unwavering devotion. For Amara and Jengo, it read, who proved that love's greatest triumph is not in never falling, but in refusing to let go when everything seems lost. The sanctuary's guest book overflowed with messages from parents who had found strength during their children's illnesses, from caregivers who discovered renewed purpose in Amara's example, and from countless individuals who had faced their own impossible choices and found courage in the story of a cheetah mother who chose love over survival. Sarah's photography workshops continued to attract aspiring conservationists who learned that the most powerful images weren't always the most dramatic, but those that captured the quiet moments when ordinary beings revealed their extraordinary capacity for sacrifice. On the 10th anniversary of their rescue, as Sarah watched Amara's great-grandchildren chase butterflies through the same grasslands where their ancestor had once faced certain death, she realized that some stories never truly end. They simply continue living in the hearts of everyone they touch, spreading like ripples across an infinite pond, inspiring new generations to believe in the power of refusing to give up on those we love. If Amara and Jengo's journey has touched your heart, please share their story with others who might need reminding that love always finds a way. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of survival, hope, and the unbreakable bonds that connect all living beings. Because in a world that often feels divided, these stories remind us of the universal language that unites us all, the courage to love without limits.